All right, great. Thank you all for joining the World Institute on Disability and the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration for today's webinar. I'm Heather Duncan with the World Institute on Disability, and I'm just going to give you a few housekeeping things to note. Today there will be ASL and captioning. You can look at the captioning in Zoom, and I'm also entering the stream text link into the chat if you would like to use that. Cameras and microphones are disabled for attendees. If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, you can do so in the chat or through the Q&A. There will be a Q&A toward the end of today's webinar. With that, let's go ahead and get started, and I'm going to turn it over to Marcy Roth from the World Institute on Disability.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marcy Roth, Executive Director of the World Institute on Disability and a founder of the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration. I'm a disabled woman, and I'm speaking to you from the unceded land of the Piscataway, now called Maryland, in the United States. My pronouns are she and her. We are all here because the Russian government has invaded Ukraine, a free and democratic country. In particular, we are here because the resulting need for Ukrainians to flee is leaving millions of Ukrainians with disabilities behind, both trapped in their homes and for hundreds of thousands of disabled children and adults trapped in orphanages, institutions, psychiatric hospitals, and carceral facilities. We are here in support of Fight for Right, a Ukrainian disabled women-led disability rights organization who we will hear from soon. We all want you to know that they need our support and partnership now and in the future. And our Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration also needs your support so that we can continue to support disability-led, disabled persons organizations, disabled-led organizations in all crises and disasters to follow. This includes the Global South and the Global North, to ensure that those disability-led organizations aren't alone and aren't marginalized and left behind, so that they can continue to serve their whole community. I want to give special thanks to our GADRA, Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration Founders Circle, the folks from Bristol Myers Squibb, AT&T, and a particular shout out to our president, Susan Mazrui, who is from AT&T, and Tina Marie from Bristol Myers Squibb. Thank you both very much, and thanks to all who are making it possible for us to support the folks from Fight to Right and disability-led organizations supporting Ukrainians with disabilities. I'm going to turn first to our GADRA co-founders from the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies, Herman Prodi and Shaylin Sluzalis.
This is Herman. Thank you, Marcy. I am a man with a disability, and alongside me is
Shaylin Sluzalis. I am a young woman with non-apparent disabilities. I use she, her pronouns. And Herman and I are the co-executive directors of the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies. We are located on the stolen land of the Lenape people, which is now known as Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And as Marcy introduced us, we are with the partnership, and we are the only US-based disability-led organization with a focused mission on equity for people with disabilities and people with access and functional needs throughout all planning, programs, services, and procedures before, during, and after disasters and emergencies.
This is Herman, and we'll be brief as we are all here to hear from our colleagues fight for right. As we do at the partnership along GADRA, in every disaster, we quickly connect with disability-led organizations, organizations led by people with disabilities. And in this time, our fellow Anna Landre, now our focal point for the Ukrainian crisis, within hours quickly connected us with Fight for Right. And Yulia and her team have been around for years doing education around the Convention of Persons with Disabilities in Ukraine, fighting for the right of persons with disabilities in Ukraine and the area. And now, weeks before the crisis began, they began establishing a hotline, as we have a similar one in the United States, knowing it is people with disabilities that know what to do best and how to best support our fellow persons with disabilities. Without further ado, and while we are all here today, I'll pass it off to Yulia, and we'll get to meet the rest of the team supporting Fight for Right and Ukrainians with disabilities. Yulia?
Good day for everyone. I'm Yulia Stachook. I'm head of Fight for Right organization of people with disabilities and also coordinator of the National Disability Rights Network in Ukraine. And also I'm one of the participants of the Obama Leadership Program Europe 2022. And actually I use she, her pronouns, and actually I'm disability rights activist for more than 15 years in Ukraine, and our organization is working for implementation of the UN Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities in Ukraine. Months before the war, when the world was discussing possible invasion of Ukraine, knowing that situation of people with disabilities could be very difficult, I started the process of finding support and coordinating our efforts to be prepared for possible invasion. In this regard, I appealed to our state authorities, to different international organizations, and I explored that even we have international standards, but there is no coordinating efforts toward possible invasion. Together with my classmate from National University of Galway Center for Disability Law and Policy, Avery, we launched Gofundme to raise money for supporting people with disabilities to provide psychological support. At the same time, we collected different resources and information, trying to build this platform for response in the situation of possible war. And for me, it's very important that we received, I know we were the community of people with disabilities who played the main and leading role. And very often we didn't receive enough support and understanding and cooperation. And I'm very thankful for World Institute on Disability, for Marcy, Anna, and other colleagues who supported us, because in the first day of the war, when I personally was in bomb shelter, when my colleagues and friends were very in stressful situation, you continued to work to develop this platform, and now we are a group of, I think 25, 30 volunteers who took this responsibility without sufficient attention and support from international leading organizations. And we trying to build a professional network and to help people with disabilities to evacuate. The main problems which we see is the lack, as I mentioned before, of coordinating efforts on the national and international levels. Also lack of accessible transportation, information in accessible formats, lack of attention to the situation of to the people with severe disabilities, with intellectual and psychosocial disabilities, especially in closed institutions. And I'm at the same time, I'm really proud of our community of people with disabilities, Ukrainians and volunteers from abroad, because now our platform is really international. And I'm really thankful for joining us, for supporting us. We, together with you, saved a lot of lives of people with disabilities who now are in safety, and we will continue to work to help people to evacuate, to receive support, to receive psychological support, to know, and the main, to know that somebody is worrying about life, and for somebody, lives of people with disabilities have the same value as people without disabilities. I appreciate our team, because I see how everyone works 24/7 trying to fill this gap in international instruments, in national, lack of coordination and systemic work toward helping and supporting people with disabilities in Ukraine. Thank you, and I appreciate that our team today can present our work and our results of common work. And I'd like to give floor for Irene Fedorovich, who helped us, my friend and colleague for many years, and now she helps us to work in advocacy, because as I mentioned before, there are a lot of gaps in the national legislation and regulation when we talk about evacuation of Ukrainians with disabilities.
Thank you, Yulia. Hello, everyone. My name is Irena. I'm helping fight for rights now with advocacy and legal advice. My pronouns are he, she, and her. And as Yulia already mentioned, because nobody was ready for this war, we have definitely quite a few gaps in our legislation, the peaceful time legislation and the wartime legislation as well, that prevent from effective and timely evacuation of people with disabilities that we are trying to deal with at the moment. What I mean, we have a law on mobilization in a peaceful time with a lot of exceptions, which men are exempted from the military service temporarily during the peaceful time, which men are exempted from the military service forever during peaceful time, and the same goes for the wartime. Immediately after the war has started, our president issued a decree on a general mobilization, and this decree also lists a number of men aged 18-60 who are exempted from being forbidden to leave Ukraine. All other able men aged 18 to 60 are forbidden to leave Ukraine right now. Though these categories of people who can travel abroad with their families or alone, even during the wartime, are quite broad. At the moment, we have a situation when our border control service lacks clear and precise instructions on how to deal with all these categories of men, what types of documents they should have with them and show at the border control office, taking that the evacuation of people from Ukraine is really massive. And we have numerous border controls. Ukraine is quite a big country. There are quite different approaches to these men and general house with that. So as Fight for Rights NGO, together with other human rights NGOs, we are trying to do two things to solve each individual complaint as much as we could, attracting assistance of lawyers, NGO lawyers and free legal aid we have in a country to consult people in per case basis. At the same time, we gather it coalition and our NGO partners, all human rights NGOs, to kind of discuss and advocate the changes to the legislation, because we understand that dealing with each individual case is okay, it's needed, it's urgent, but so what we need is to establish enough and clear and precise rules just to mitigate the situation. So our internal advocacy efforts are now focused on the State Border Control Service and also the Ministry of War to ensure that they work on these regulations and that they control the border control points and officers, and they quickly and effectively react to this different situation when men with disabilities are refused from leaving Ukraine. At the same time, with our international partners, we are trying to research and build a case for the evacuation of the institutions, the closed institutions, both for children and adults that we have in Ukraine, where people with disabilities are living. So we're exploring these possibilities and again, trying to kind of build the legislation and the rules and instructions for these cases to be effective. That's it, I will stop here.
Thank you. My name is Avery Horn and my pronouns are she, her. First and foremost, I'm Yulia's friend and am currently in Ireland, also getting my master's degree alongside Yulia in international and comparative disability law and policy. Right now, I'm working as the external coordinator for Fight for Right, since that was a necessary gap that must be filled in the unfolding of events that occurred. But today I'm going to talk mostly about institutions and priorities for Fight for Right and the external coordination efforts that have been happening. Building off what was just said about institutions, we're very concerned about what's happening in institutions right now. So there are varied reports on the preconditions of institutions in Ukraine, and there are varied reports on the number of individuals in institutions in Ukraine. There was a UN complaint recently about the institutions, and that is definitely worth looking at for those of you who are interested in engaging on this effort. But that reflects a big concern that's pre-existing before the war, and even more so now. We are receiving reports from many angles, some of which are hard to verify, that there are attacks and targeted attacks on institutions, on hospitals, and humanitarian aid is vitally needed. We don't know, for large part, if these institutions, these orphanages, among many others, have access to food, have access to water, energy, staffing. There have been reports that staff have been leaving and that there's a grave situation occurring, especially in the institutions that are in urban areas that are under direct attack or focused attack. As mentioned before, the difficulties with the emergency legislation and the way that that legislation will be interpreted is definitely something that must be focused on, particularly when it comes to trying to cross the border. But an immediate need is trying to get institutions and groups of individuals in those institutions to safer places, even if it means moving in a different position in Ukraine. What's needed is very much contacts with these institutions, but beyond that, we need to trigger the system of humanitarian aid to address specifically what's going on in institutions. We are getting calls here and there, but we are searching very much for these institutions to try to assist in any way that we can as a group of mobilized volunteers. Before I move on, I just want to reiterate some of the priorities that are coming out of our efforts as an internal and external system, Fight for Right, and the entire organization that existed prior to the war, and now all of our external partners. Chiefly, we want to focus on connections to other NGOs who are doing evacuations, connections to accessible transport inside of Ukraine, which is still largely missing. And we'll talk more about that. We're looking for connections to NGOs who have the ability to provide sustained accessible support at border areas, particularly leads to NGOs, initiatives, or even private persons who can provide short and long-term accessible housing. And the areas in specific that we need additional help are in Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Moldova. So please do get in contact with us if that sounds like a group that you might be in contact with. Again, that would be accessible support, housing at the border regions. We're looking for accessible legal support, as was previously mentioned, specifically to share with the community of individuals who are reaching out, requesting assistance from us, which you'll hear about shortly. We're looking, again, for connections to institutions, for reports that we can share so that we can create a solid, unified effort with other NGOs to call and act to the best of our ability where there are gaps, but to call for action from humanitarian aid, international humanitarian aid in this area. We also welcome any other mental health resources that we can share with those who are calling for help right now and immediately might not be asking for mental health support, but we know that it's something that'll be needed. Finally, the best way to support us right now is our GoFundMe, and please do continue to share. I'm going to pass it off to Anna and Ira, who are going to talk more about the cases we're receiving daily and the gaps we're trying to fill.
Yes, thanks, Avery. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Landry. My pronouns are she and her. I'm based here in London, and right now I'm acting as the Partnership for Inclusive Disaster Strategies Ukraine Crisis Focal Point. The partnership began to support Fight for Right on cases as of last Sunday, so only 11 days ago. And since then, we've received over 114 cases of people with disabilities who have requested our help in evacuating, with 70 of those cases still in progress. I'm very proud of our team to share that we, with our small amount of resources and personnel, have successfully evacuated at least 90 individuals with disabilities and their loved ones. And I also want to stress that these efforts have been really grassroots, with a really small group of volunteers who have been working around the clock in time zones ranging from the US to here in London to in Ukraine itself to save these lives. And as Avery and some of the other speakers have shared, we as two small organizations are simply not equipped to manage evacuations of people with disabilities in a conflict environment. But because of the lack of attention to this issue, we've stepped in, and I'd like to kind of tell you what we're seeing here. And the overall trend has been that there's an assumption in humanitarianism, the field as a whole, and what we're seeing here in Ukraine, that movement is a proxy for vulnerability. But what we're seeing here is that many people can't move, including people with disabilities. They have trouble evacuating, they have trouble leaving. So they aren't able to access the humanitarian aid that's now being provided to refugees and to internally displaced persons, because these people are not able to become displaced and get there. And so many of these people with disabilities are simply not being addressed by the current approach to this humanitarian crisis. And in Ukraine, that's 2.7 million people. And we in our cases are hearing from a lot of them. I'm just going to briefly reiterate the biggest trends in the cases that we have currently in our database, as some of the other speakers have mentioned. So our first biggest need has been transportation within Ukraine, going from people's houses to a border point. We've struggled to find accessible transportation, especially for people who need transport for their wheelchair or need to be transported in a stretcher. And second, in our cases, we've seen the issue that Irene shared of disabled men being denied exit at the borders. And we're still trying to find a systemic legal solution for that in order to make sure that they can exit. And third, we've been struggling to get disability accessible transportation, housing, and other resources for our cases in neighboring countries once they exit Ukraine. We've found that most existing aid and settlement resources are not inclusive. For example, one of our biggest problems is that buses from border points in Poland to refugee registration centers are not wheelchair accessible. And then finally, as Avery shared, we're really seeking more information about people in institutions. We have a few cases of institutionalized folks who we haven't been able to help, and we're looking for ways to do that. We think this is a really neglected area that the international community really needs to address. I'm now going to turn it over to Ira, who's our amazing case lead. She came on board this past week and has done an unbelievable job in increasing our efficiency and our capacity to evacuate people. So go ahead, Ira.
Hi, my name is Yuria, and I'm very thankful for Anna for so kind words. My pronouns are she, her, and I will talk a little bit about what challenges do we have now for evacuating people, especially in areas under constant rocket fire. And the most vulnerable groups are, of course, those people who need a special transportation vehicle to leave the dangerous area. And we are talking about ambulances with electricity sockets to plug a ventilator in, or persons who need to be traveling like lying down. And this is our major challenge right now, to find this kind of transportation to meet the needs of people that requested our help. And other issue that is really hot right now is the inability of Russian troops to keep a ceasefire and to provide green corridors in areas where the military action is constantly ongoing. So the people with disabilities are majorly placed in a hostage position in this area because nobody can access safely meeting points from where transportation for evacuated people are provided. And other cases that we're receiving a lot of help from the charity organizations. Also, I'm following the leads with the municipal authorities. Of course, they are not helping enough as we want them to help, but they're trying. And sometimes when we have a team of case managers who can access this context and can provide them information of people with disabilities that need evacuation. They working closely then in these cases, and this we are trying to provide right now. And of course, this is our main priority right now, to get as much people as we can to safety, and to provide them with accessible housing at the point of their destination, and also not to lose anyone in this long run. And I'm still in Ukraine, I'm still working in the field. And I hope that we will be able to evacuate persons, especially in the hotspots, as soon as possible. Thank you.
This is Marcy, and I want to express my own personal gratitude for the leadership of the Fight for Right team, and for all who are supporting them, and all who've made the time to be here with us today, and to hear from them. I am also really pleased that our founder at the World Institute on Disability, and now a board member emeritus of the World Institute on Disability, and frequently called the mother of disability rights, and many, many, many other things in her role as an international disability rights leader. And I'm also grateful to be able to call her my friend. Judy, I know folks are really looking forward to hearing from you.
Well, first of all, I'd really like to start out by saying how traumatized many of us are by what's going on in Ukraine. And these words are trite, but our hearts really go out to all of you, your family, your friends. And I know that each one of you that's working on this situation, whether or not you're from Ukraine, are experiencing emotional impact. And one of the previous speakers, I think might have been Avery, mentioned earlier the fact that people being able to get some mental health support is going to be really critical, and I completely agree. One aspect of today's meeting, which I think is very important, is hearing from all of you who are doing direct work in this area. And unfortunately, I would like to say that many of the issues that you're discussing are really not surprising. Our countries have not, in many cases, had appropriate laws to deal with things like housing and accessibility or accessible transportation. So the stock that exists at the country level is frequently not accessible. And so really looking at how we can do workarounds, which I'm sure you're all thinking about, is very important. In the area of transportation, whether or not there are vehicles where a wooden ramp could be made to push people into those vehicles. I don't want to get into problem solving with all of you because you're much more engaged on a day-to-day basis, but we have to look at alternatives because what we need is not what we have. So we have to look at other ways of addressing this. Plus, of course, the fact that many of the people that we're talking about are actually able to physically walk and move around, but will need other kinds of support services like sign language interpreters or people to support individuals with intellectual or developmental disabilities or blindness or whatever it may be. So for me, coordination is critical in looking at the myriad of organizations that are working in this area. So we are going to be hearing from UNHCR and the European Disability Forum and the International Disability Rights Office at the Department of State. There are other organizations like Disability Rights International, which I assume you're working with, but they have been focusing on issues around institutions and deinstitutionalization for many, many years now, and are definitely doing some work in Ukraine. And if you don't have their contacts, I'll be happy to give them to you. Also, Abilis in Finland is another group, and I know I know a number of you know them. Getting them involved, I think, could also be very helpful because they've been involved over the years on issues around refugee camps in Africa and other sites, and the whole issue of accessibility and accessibility not being taken into consideration is something that they've been working on with other groups. So I think right now, there's a lot of learning that's going on at the same time that we don't have time to really learn because we need to be acting, but obviously that's what you're all doing. I am, of course, continuously going to be working with Marcy and all of you, and just really want to thank you. Many of the issues that you're discussing are issues that we've known about, that when I worked over at the State Department under the Obama administration, and I know Sarah Minkara and Ann Cody, Kathy Guernsey over at USAID are all working on. So bonding together, continuing to really highlight the problems that you're facing, the successes that you're having, and how you're making those successes occur, and being able to share that information with some of the other larger humanitarian groups. I know Save the Children is also in Ukraine, and UNICEF. I don't know if you're working with those groups, but I'm very interested in hearing what others are doing. So I'm going to cut my remarks a little bit short, and just to say, with deep gratitude for everything you're doing, and we will all continue to support you, period. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Judy. Your practical suggestions are always spot on and helpful. Deep to the right is to fuel the rest of us. And I'm going to turn to Herman, but yes, Eric has been incredibly supportive, and we really appreciate the partnership with Disability Rights International. And I'm now going to turn to Herman, who is going to introduce, I think it's going to be Dan. I don't think Brian has been able to join us.
This is Herman. Thank you, Marcy. And again, thank you, Judy, for all the work you do always globally to bring disability rights and our needs to the forefront. And Yulia and the whole team supporting Fight for Right. Everyone's hearts are with you, and we are here to support you ongoingly. Dan is joining us, who's been connected to GADRA by Tina Marie from Bristol Myers Squibb. Dan is with Kingsman doing great work, helping the calls coming in from Fight for Right with evacuations and much more. I'll pass it off to Dan. Thanks, Dan.
Morning, everybody. Thank you, Herman. My name is Dan Manning. I am the CEO of USPA Nationwide Security. I'm a managing member of Kingsman Philanthropic Corporation. Kingsman is a 501c3 registered charity that was formed in 2005 to combat human trafficking and conduct kidnap recoveries and rescues. When the war started, we transitioned over to doing evacuations because of our extensive security network. Currently, we are working with the World Institute on Disability. They provided us with a list of approximately 120 names, plus some others that we have to conduct rescues. A teammate of mine, Brian Fitzgibbons, was supposed to give this introduction. He is actually working around the clock to provide the operational support. We are serving as the boots on the ground for the evacuations, working with a network of our NGOs or our NGOs that we've partnered with in the past, providing highly trained medics and security officers to conduct the operations. As of now, the best way that we can be supported is financially. Cut right to the chase. These rescues do cost money, so the more that we have, the more that we can help out with. We are conducting operations around the clock with 11 planned for today. Without getting into too much of the operational side of things, I would refer everybody to Marcy if they have questions. Marcy knows how to contact us securely so that we can get you the best answer for your questions. I will leave my contact information in the message board. Feel free to reach out to me directly via email, and I can also help out with whatever else is necessary. Thank you.
This is Marcy. Thank you so much, Dan. And please convey our thanks to the rest of the team. I know you had a very significant success yesterday in rescuing some folks in a very, very difficult situation. We're very relieved that that was successful. And I want to also be clear that the costs are for the actual rescue process. The team is not making any money on this. It's for the actual rescue. Let's now hear from a incredible ally, partner, someone I've been working with on disaster issues for more years than I think we'd like to admit. But from the European Disability Forum, Gordon Rattray is International Cooperation Officer, and we've been working side by side over the last week in support of Fight for Right and Ukrainians with disabilities.
Thank you very much, Marcy, and thank you for the opportunity to participate today. So just briefly, European Disability Forum is an umbrella organization of persons with disabilities that defends the rights of persons with disabilities in Europe. And what I tried to do is briefly, in roughly chronological order, explain what we've been doing since the 24th, really, since the escalation. So the first thing that we did as EDF, as European Disability Forum, was put an immediate statement online highlighting the situation for persons with disabilities and their rights under the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and international humanitarian law. We contacted our members in neighboring countries, and many of them were already starting to work, as we've heard already from previous speakers, in countries like Poland, Slovakia, Romania, with things like accessible transport, shelter, medications, assistive technology for people arriving on the border. We're also responding to organizations of persons with disabilities who have contacted us that we didn't already know, and working on supporting them and identifying what it is that we can do with them. And in the first few days, we also contacted and spoke with other European organizations who are members of EDF, including Inclusion Europe and the European Network of Service Providers for Persons with Disabilities. We met with policy staff of the European Commission's Departments for Humanitarian Aid and Civil Protection, and also for migration and asylum. And we followed these meetings up with official letters to these departments a couple of days later. It's fair to say that everybody that we have spoken to so far has been overwhelmed, and the intention of our meetings was to highlight the situation for persons with disabilities and the increased risk that they face. We also are collaborating with UNHCR and UNICEF, sharing what we're doing with them and learning what they're doing and making links between them and other organizations and organizations of persons with disabilities who are our members or not in the field. Regarding the UN coordination mechanism, we immediately sent an official letter from EDF to the UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, again highlighting the priority needs and the rights of persons with disabilities. And we're now feeding information which is often very specific, very detailed information into the Age and Disability Technical Working Group, which is part of the protection cluster. So this includes things like details of institutions where there's no food, no water, no heating oil, medications, that kind of thing. And there was maybe you have seen, but there was a policy brief that came out from the protection cluster yesterday on the rights of persons with disabilities, which is worth reading, using, and referring to in your advocacy work. Our ongoing work, and starting next week, there is a strategy meeting that we're going to attend with the EU on their We Care policy, and also we're looking at their plans for temporary protection directive. So basically how the EU is going to treat refugees arriving from Ukraine. And of course, from our point of view, that's making sure that refugees with disabilities have got equal access to everything that they require. We're doing practical things like translation of guidelines and tools, and we're directing humanitarian agencies to DPOs, and also directing people who want, or organizations, people in organizations who want to make donations to organizations of persons with disabilities who are responding. And lastly, I will say that with all of you, many of our staff have been full-time busy the last week, 10 days on this, and we're now looking to employ extra people to work on it. We've developed a framework to guide our activities, not just in the next weeks and months, but in the long term, up to 2 years. And we're identifying things like meeting immediate needs, both in and outside of Ukraine, influencing the wider humanitarian response, and building the capacity of our members and other organizations of persons with disabilities in the long term. So I'll stop there. I hope that gives you a rough overview, and please contact me if you need more information.
Thank you so much, Gordon. I think those were incredibly helpful updates, and we, of course, will do what we can to help spread the word for additional support. Our next speaker, someone I first connected with when we were working together on the United Nations Humanitarian Action in Persons with Disabilities guidance, which was published several years later in 2019. Since then, Ricardo Placordero has joined the UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, as a protection officer for disability inclusion. And Ricardo has been quite supportive as we try to navigate connecting Fight for Right and disability-led organizations with UNHCR and the work that they are doing. Ricardo?
Thank you, Marcy, and hello everyone. Thank you for this moment. So my name is Ricardo Pla, my pronouns he, his, and I work as a protection officer in Geneva, as mentioned by Marcy, in the UN High Commissioners for Refugees. Just a few updates on the previous work to give an idea of what was happening before. So persons with disabilities were around 19% of cases supported through individual protection support in Ukraine as of December 2021. This included supporting accessing documentation, supporting cross-entry and exit points from areas already afflicted by conflict. And there was a working group, as mentioned by Gordon, on age and disability, led by the National Protection Cluster and coordinated by HelpAge. With the occupation and the scaling of the conflict, there was a flash appeal and a regional response plans that were developed. The flash appeal by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, and I will share the links so everyone can use them as well for advocacy and for planning. And then there was a refugee response plans as well for the refugee response around in neighboring countries. Both documents have mentions to persons with disabilities, and we would welcome all organizations making UN entities accountable for these commitments. In terms of other actions, so national organizations of persons with disabilities have been invited to participate in these protection cluster meetings. It is a lesson learned to highlight that this should have been happened before. And thanking Marcy, Julia, Gordon, and the representative organizations for the flexibility and their commitment to engage in humanitarian-led mechanisms despite coordination sensitivities. The cluster has, as mentioned by Gordon, the Global Protection Cluster has shared recommendations. There's as well a Power BI, so a platform with protection monitoring data, and which includes as well which groups are most at risk or are being reported most at risk, with persons with disabilities being third after children and women. And of course, considering that within women and children groups, there are women and children with disabilities. UNHCR is scaling up as well the protection staff around countries and doing deployments as well on disability, in addition to child protection and GVV. And a key information gap, and with this I try to finalize as I've gone over time. The key issue is information on asylum procedures. So first, not only evacuation, but then who is going to be able to leave the country. And I shared information on the conscription and the martial law in the chats, but as well who is, what are the procedures for requesting asylum in neighboring countries and other countries. I'm going to share a link. There's information with about the neighboring countries, about asylum procedures, leaving clear that UNHCR is not registering refugees at this moment. This is responsibility of the national authorities, but we can be of support, and we are advocating for the use of the Washington Group questions, which we have requested the Washington Group Secretariat to translate into Ukrainian, and they did it in 1 day. So it's very, very, very efficient as well commitment from them, and we can share those, and encouraging all authorities to use them. Final points, we are discussing as well with the World Federation of the Deaf, producing sign language videos with information on key international protection asylum procedures that could be made available in support hubs around the region, but as well to allow for on-demand interpretation services for asylum procedures in particular, but other procedures would be as well very welcome. I stop here. Thank you for giving this time for providing an update. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ricardo. A lot of very important information. I will particularly note your reminder to hold the UN agencies accountable and welcome every opportunity to work together as quickly as we possibly can. Our colleague, Lynn Madnick from the US State Department had to leave. She wanted me to convey her thanks to Yulia and Fight for Right for keeping us informed and letting us know the most urgent needs. And she also thanked WID for organizing the briefing. And I know that the US State Department has been very available, and we are in close communication with them, and will continue to do so. I am now going to turn to Dawn Skaggs from our team. Dawn will give us some brief information, and then we will get to questions and answers.
Hello, I'm Dawn Skaggs, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Director of Emergency Disaster and Climate Resilience here at the World Institute on Disability. In this area of the World Institute on Disability, we lead emergency planning, response and recovery and mitigation work to build engagement of the robust resources within the global disability community. And we work to impact and reduce the disproportionate impact of disasters on people with disabilities. The Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Reduction, which you have occasionally heard referred to as GADRA on this call, is a collaborative that's a part of our work towards disaster health equity, disability, security, justice, universal inclusion and humanitarian aid, and disaster risk reduction for people with disabilities. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what that means in the context of what's been happening over the last 2 weeks. We work to minimize the impact of the most significantly impacted populations in the community. The Global Alliance is a coalition of disability-led organizations in partnership with corporate, foundation, and humanitarian entities to provide support, expertise, and coordination. And we have stepped in to join with Fight for Right and the fabulously passionate, articulate people you have heard speak already today. As you've heard, the needs are huge. The people are compassionate and passionate, but the resources are few. And so in order to continue this work of saving lives and helping people who are currently being left behind, there's many layers of work that we're addressing. The Global Alliance has been coordinating together with the Partnership and Fight for Right on accessible evacuation, assistance at the borders, resettlement in new locations, case management and care coordination, centralized operations and communications, developing and maintaining the necessary tools and technology to make these happen, mutual aid and networks of support, disability-led agency engagement, safety and protection measures, and disability-related services and support, together with individual personalized assistance for survivors. The Global Alliance has been incredibly fortunate to have the incredible partners and support of our Founder Circle members, our corporate partners, our peers from other amazing disability-led organizations and responding agencies, and from socially responsible individuals. We're going to round out this hour together with an opportunity for you to join Fight for Right, to join the Global Alliance who has come up beside Fight for Right on this mission to respond to the needs of people with disabilities in Ukraine and the ongoing needs of those who still need, who are currently being evacuated, and those who have successfully evacuated, because the challenges do not stop when you cross the border. You can help today by donating any amount to these efforts in the link that Heather is going to be dropping in the chat. We'll also be sending this link out directly following this presentation. This link will take you directly to the PayPal site that has been set up for this specific mission. Contributions of any amount will be greatly appreciated, and they will be put to good use to support all facets of these operations. They'll be managed through the finance department at the World Institute on Disabilities, who has set up the system to ensure the best use of these funds as a result of multiple other previous Global Alliance responses. Later today, the World Institute on Disability Studies and the Global Alliance is rolling out another way to support Fight for Right. Thanks to the assistance from AT&T and the Mobile Giving Foundation, we're providing a text to give campaign opportunity. This is an easy way to step in and join in this mission effort. By later today, you'll be able to text WID, W-I-D, for the World Institute on Disabilities to 20222 in order to send a $10 donation, or WORLD, W-O-R-L-D, to 20222 to send to a $25 donation to the mission. Again, that's WID, W-I-D, to 20222, or WORLD, W-O-R-L-D, to 20222. It's a simple text on your phone that will come out of your monthly bill, and you'll be able to join in the amazing work that you've been hearing about so far today. You'll be receiving this information in case you weren't able to capture that for the PayPal and for the text to give opportunities later this afternoon following this webinar event. That will come to your contact information that you provided when you signed up to join. You may also log on to GADRA.org, G-A-D-R-A.org, where you can help and join GADRA. You may log into WID.org, where you'll be able to have the same experience. You can find out a little bit more about what we're doing, get on our email list, and we can keep you updated, and you can share this information with others that you know who may not have been able to join us today. Thank you in advance for joining us and for your participation in this important collaboration as we move forward towards saving lives, reestablishing lives, and providing hope. I'm going to turn it over now to Shaylin from the partnership, who will host us with a question and answer period, because I'm sure you have many. Thank you so much. Shaylin?
This is Shaylin, and thank you, Dawn. And thank you all for adding comments in the chat and into the Q&A. I do want to encourage, as I address some questions that we have already, for folks to please, if you have any questions, to put them in the Q&A section so we can address them. And if we are not able to get to your question today, we will provide information following the event, as Dawn mentioned, more information to come. One question that came in from Aaron, I want folks to note and certainly follow folks that are doing this work. The question Aaron asks is, are there social media accounts we can help share for getting specific stories out there, or are there spaces for storytelling for awareness raising? And first and foremost, want to encourage everyone to please follow Fight for Right on Facebook and on Twitter. We've also provided their website to learn more about them. They are putting out information as they can, and on the evacuations and resources connecting that they are able and doing on the grounds. We're also at the partnership amplifying those messages and also helping put out information with Fight for Right. So do take a look through the partnership's Facebook and Twitter as well. And our website has been provided. And more information about the announcement that Dawn just made about text to donate will be provided on the GADRA, the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration, Facebooks and Twitter, and we'll be also sharing throughout all of our networks. So thank you for that question, Aaron. And I provided those links also to Aaron's reply, and I know those have been also being put in the chat, and all of this information will be provided after the event as well. We had another question come in from Kelly, who asked about connections with international humanitarian organizations and asking for more information with which organizations we may be working with and which ones we're seeking connections. And just want to reiterate that we are connected with a lot of organizations in the surrounding countries, bordering countries, and groups around and on the grounds. If you'd like to share resources with us, please do email us. We've added that in the chat and in the Q&A reply. That email is directors@disasterstrategies.org. perhaps maybe Fight for Right or Anna, folks want to add around what resources we're really looking for at this moment?
Yeah, I can step in really quick and just emphasize specifically at the border regions, we have made connections with OPDs or DPOs, depending on how they identify in the border regions, but direct contacts are critical. Specifically, we are still looking for who can provide short and long-term accessible housing in Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Moldova, because we need to make initial connections at the borders, but there's a sustained need as well. So I'll repeat that again: direct contacts with individuals who could possibly provide short and long-term accessible housing in Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Moldova, which have been the areas of most need, at least from our cases. So thank you, Shaylin.
This is Shaylin. Thank you, Avery. Also, I see quite a few questions coming in around the resources mentioned, the information about donating, and the links that have been provided. All of this information will be sent out after this event for all that have registered, and we'll of course be sharing this on our social media sites as well. So please do follow folks at Fight for Right, at the Partnership, and the Global Alliance for Disaster Resource Acceleration, and the World Institute on Disability. We're sharing information as soon as we have it and putting it out rapidly. So please do follow and share within your networks. And thank you all for these questions. Any other questions, Heather, that I'm missing maybe in the chat?
Hi, Shaylin. We do have one hand raised by Igor. Igor, I'm going to allow you to talk if you have a question.
Great. And Igor will be using an ASL interpreter, I believe. Is that right, Igor? Igor, you can ask your question.
This is Herman, ASL interpreter. Igor is deaf. It's Ukrainian, so it's in the US. If you could communicate that his camera is off.
I'm going to promote Igor to a panelist so he can turn his camera on.
Thank you, Heather.
Yes, can you see me?
Yes. Igor.
Okay. Yes, finally. Excellent. Yes. Hello, my name is Igor, and I am from the Independent Living Center. I am deaf. I'm a deaf advocate here in Ukraine. And some of the deaf here in the country have, of course, evacuated the country. We're focusing on persons who are deaf-blind and also deaf who use wheelchairs. And it's very heart-wrenching to see the supports that they need. And also for deaf-blind who need tactile interpreting to communicate, there's absolutely nothing as far as tactile support for them. And it's very heart-wrenching. I have not been able to contact all of the deaf in the region for services personally. And where you have persons who are deaf and disabled, that's the situation that we have. And it definitely is touching my heart, and we're definitely keeping them in our thoughts at this time. And please do the same.
This is Shaylin. Thank you, Igor. Really appreciate all your work and for joining us today.
Yes, no problem. Thank you.
This is Shaylin. I see a question that has come in from Lauren asking if folks know of any sexual minority LGBTQ focused efforts as well. I'm not sure if folks at Fight for Right might like to answer.
I believe Ira might have some resources on that. I also want to note that As I'm sure many know, there's a lot of intersection of the disability and various queer communities, and several of the cases of evacuees that we have helped have been both disabled and part of the LGBTQI plus community. But I'll also turn it over to Ira if she wants to add anything.
Yes, there are organizations that grassroots organizations that are helping people on the ground and helping trans people for accessing necessary medication, and the border crossing is still a complicated issue for people who currently have a different gender marker. And it's been a joint effort for a lot of people to provide shelter for LGBTQ plus people in Ukraine, to equip their spaces. Sometimes it's just accessible like basement where people can congregate in safety and to hide from air raids. And yeah, I can name a few initiatives like Bilkis, Cohorta, Resu, Independent Feminist, Soon Cooperative, Zboku, who are working now and trying to get food, medicine, and sometimes helping with the evacuations and legal support at the border crossing right now.
This is Shaylin, and thank you, Irna. With that, I know we are short on time. We are getting close to the end of our time together. I want to thank everyone for your questions, for your comments. A lot of information will be coming your way today, so please be on the lookout. Much more to come, and thank you all for joining us and for your support for Ukrainians with disabilities during this really incredibly disastrous time. I want to pass it off to our folks at Fight for Right for any closing remarks you may like to share. Maybe Avery or Yulia?
Yeah, thank you so much, Shaylin. Yulia will also speak right now. I just want to make sure I can. Okay, good. I see Yulia. Okay. I just want to reemphasize here that we're so thankful that our team of volunteers with Fight for Right has been expanded and grown, and the outreach and coordination has improved vastly over the last 10 days. But it's very much worth emphasizing that it's the burden of work and the effort that has been done is almost entirely on the Ukrainians with disabilities who are evacuating and serving and directly speaking to other Ukrainians with disabilities who have urgent needs and are sharing in horrible circumstances. So the priorities for direct humanitarian aid and connections with other groups, also with groups like Igor's, who are doing direct work to try to reach these individuals and help them as they are primarily helping themselves, is critical. So we want to thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you can come alongside us in directly supporting Ukrainians with disabilities who are impacted and leading the effort on serving and reaching Ukrainians with disabilities. And I will turn it over to Yulia, who will say the final piece here.
Yes, thank you, Avery. Thank you, everyone. And really, these days, you know, I feel, and our team and our community feel such support we couldn't imagine. Yes, this moment is very sad, and war is very sad, but I'm really proud that community of people with disabilities from Ukraine, from abroad, are united in our efforts of saving lives, and I really don't have words to express my appreciation. I'm also know about, and finally, I really want to ask, not to stand and only like monitor or observe the situation. As Avery said, we need direct support. I want to ask Igor to contact us because I really know how is difficult situation in Ukraine for deaf, especially deaf and blind people. I also know, and I have today conversation with Raisa Kravchenko, who is the head of the National Coalition of People with Intellectual Disabilities. And it is also very difficult. And all we discussed why in this situation of war, we as a human rights activists, as a disability rights activists, looking for, I don't know, any support, and why these platforms and groups have never been created before, and we were not ready for such situation. Some may be negative, but very important for me point. I always now trying to say this about UN mechanisms and emergencies. We have conversation with Ricardo before the war, and he's shared with me a lot of resources. But at the same time, we have the conversation and meeting with protection cluster in Ukraine. And we didn't receive any support, any direct support. And I still don't know any person with disability who was supported. I know only one organization, Proliska, who support people with disabilities. And I say this not before I'm I don't know, only to criticize. I really want to improve international mechanisms. I was fighting for implementation of UN Convention in Ukraine from the beginning, from the ratification. I'm really dedicated. I am ready, I don't know, to spend my life, because people with disabilities are my family, community, friends. And to hear during our meeting with protection cluster, when I asked about information in accessible formats, and moderator asked me to make information for me accessible by myself, it's really not the level of that UN which I was fighting for. And please don't be silent about this, because very often I feel like, might a woman who demands a lot. No, I don't demand. I demand rights, human rights for me, for my community, for every person with disability in this world. And in the end, once again, I'm really thankful for Marcy, for World Institute on Disability, for partnership for inclusive disaster strategies, for every person who supports not only Fight for Right as team, as organization, but all Ukrainians with disabilities. And please, if you person with disability want to be included, to be volunteer, or to work on this process, or to receive support, please don't hesitate. Contact me, Avery, any volunteer, and I'm totally sure that we will do our best to find solution and to save Ukrainians with disabilities rights. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for joining us today. And with that, that is the end of our webinar today. And we will be sending out email follow-ups to all attendees later today. Thank you so much. Goodbye.